Welcome to this EDUcast Messaging Revolution. Our theme today is Business Messaging Industry is About to Change Big Time. Today's speaker is Caroline Sutton, Senior Manager, Product Marketing Bandwidth, and I'm Gary Auden. As we always do, we discuss our agenda. We're going to talk about messaging as it is in 2019, which is changing. To help us understand what's going on, we talk about the evolution of messaging, classifications, messaging success, what's going to be impacted in 2019, where does the FCC fit into all of this, some meaningful messaging functionality, and something really worthwhile, some business tips that we think can help you with messaging. So Caroline, let's start off with the beginning. What's changing? What's happening in messaging this year?
So Gary, there's quite a few changes happening in the messaging landscape this year. And most of these changes surround the A2P versus P2P landscape, which I believe we'll get into in a future slide. But essentially, the business of messaging is booming. And because of that boom, a lot around the messaging industry is changing to make way for this big business that's come into play. So one of the big changes that's happening this year, especially, is the industry is getting ready to sunset shared shortcodes. So some carriers have already come out and announced that they'll not be accepting new shared shortcodes. They may begin to phase out existing ones. They may be more harsh about spam policies on shared shortcodes, sort of like a one-hit policy, and really getting more and more careful about what shared shortcodes are allowed and not allowed on their network as they begin to phase them out.
This next screen brings up a question I have not encountered. Is there spam in this environment?
So the reason for the shared shortcode sunset is because today shared shortcodes are the #1 source of spam on carrier networks. And when that happens, so today shared shortcodes are one of the cheaper, easier ways to access an A2P or application to person network, which allows for that high volume message sending, things like alerts, notifications, promotions. And let's assume that one of these shared shortcodes gets into the hands of a bad actor, somebody who's sending maybe a phishing scheme where they're offering up a Walmart gift card in exchange for information. Those are unwanted messages. People like you and me don't want to receive those messages from someone that we haven't opted into. And unfortunately, shared shortcodes are one of the really common ways of sending those spam messages. So in order to lessen the impact and keep our messaging inboxes clean of spam, carriers are going out and just shutting down the shared shortcode program slowly and gradually. But what that means is that a lot of folks are looking for alternatives, affordable alternatives for their shared shortcodes. And we've got a couple of new products that will serve as great alternatives for shared shortcode users. One of those is mentioned here, which I think we're going to talk about later in the EDUcast, local A2P, or and some folks in the industry are calling this 10DLC, which stands for 10-digit long code. So 10DLC is a new carrier route that's going to be able to send that high volume traffic over local numbers. And similarly today here at Bandwidth, we've got high volume capable toll-free numbers that can also serve as a great alternative for those folks looking for something that can carry the same type of traffic as shared shortcodes, but at an affordable price.
Let's go back in time a little bit, because I think it's helpful for the audience to understand, how did the iPhone come to help us in this messaging world?
If we're going back in time into what caused this blow up of messaging that I referred to on the first slide here, the iPhone was actually a big moment in messaging history. Previous to the iPhone, you might remember sending text through like T9. So you might have to tap 4 or 3 times in order to get the letter L in your text message. But when the iPhone came out, it had a QWERTY keyboard. So it made it a whole lot easier to type on, more predictable. And folks like, me, your grandma, started texting and at a really rapid pace. So the iPhone is certainly one of the things that's causing this boom in business messaging.
Let's continue with that roadmap of text messaging industry.
The iPhone back in 2007, 2008 timeline And back then, messaging was fairly new. Most of the messaging that was happening was person-to-person or conversational messaging. So it's me messaging you, you messaging me, we're talking like friends. But you really didn't see businesses picking up text messaging until much later on in the game. So 2001, one of the first businesses, and you might be surprised to know about it, started adapting shortcodes, and that was American Idol. So American Idol let you vote on your favorite contestant via text message. And you might never know it, but yeah, American Idol was really a big moment for the text messaging industry because it was the first time that a business embraced text messaging as a technology. And ever since then, you know, it's really, really grown and picked up. Today, it's not unusual to get a text message from your doctor reminding you about your upcoming doctor's appointment. It's almost expected. And folks like Bandwidth and the big carriers on the scene as well are launching new ways to adapt and access this text messaging from businesses. So a couple of years ago, we here at Bandwidth launched toll-free numbers as a way for businesses to send high-volume text messages. Your toll-free number up until this point, you know, expected channel for support and sales calls, but maybe you've never thought about it as an avenue for sending and receiving text messages. And then, you know, we look for later this year, that 10DLC route that I mentioned or our local A2P product will be coming more broadly to the market. And then we look past that and things like RCS are even pushing the industry even further. So where you might have like banners or polls or, you know, think crazy with the types of technology that'll all be able to be supported by text messaging.
The next slide has an acronym CTIA. What's its influence on messaging?
The CTIA is the industry lobbying group that is sort of the roundtable that the entire messaging industry gathers at to agree upon rules, guidelines, acceptable behavior, things of that nature which sort of guide the industry forward. So things that the CTIA are looking for, you know, what's typical behavior for a P2P message, like we discussed before? What's P2P traffic versus what's A2P traffic, or that application to person high volume traffic? And this line, the image that we're looking at here is how the CTIA defines P2P or person-to-person traffic. So if you're looking at person-to-person traffic, you're looking for a throughput of about, you know, a message a second, no more than that. A volume of about 1,000 messages sent per day. Unique recipients of about 200. Or balance, you know, if I'm messaging you, you're messaging me, back and forth. So when we look to classify, you know, where does this type of messaging fit? Is this a P2P use case or is this an A2P use case? These guidelines and the folks behind the CTIA can help us understand what's what. And that becomes really important when we're talking about this evolving messaging landscape, because you might have solutions that are built for P2P use cases, and you might have different solutions entirely that are built for A2P use cases. A lot of the new emerging use cases, or new emerging solutions rather, are built for these A2P high volume solutions. So understanding, you know, what the lines are and where the blurriness is can really help you as a business embrace the right type of technology.
This next screen has a huge number on it. Are there really that many messages per day?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about this big booming business of business messaging, and to put a number around it, we're seeing trillions and trillions of text sent every single day, and this number is only rising. And a lot of the growth that's pushing these numbers is businesses that are picking up text messaging. They're really seeing the value.
When we look at messaging, from looking at this screen, it seems to be a very popular but also very useful technology. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When we're looking, you know, to explain sort of why the growth in text messaging is growing so quickly, text messaging is just a super valuable channel for communications. Not only is it super efficient, it's also extremely effective. So you're not going to ignore a text message when you see it. They've got 98%, almost 100% open rates, almost 50% click-through and response rates, and you're going to respond quickly. So it gets attention like absolutely no other channel in communication.
Now this screen has two words, expectation and reality. Would you tell us the difference there?
So really this slide's talking about, you as a business or you as a human, you send a text and you expect that it gets delivered. But behind the scenes, that text is actually analyzed several times, and it might not actually get delivered if you're not adhering to some best practices. Some folks are oftentimes surprised at the amount of text messages that don't go delivered. And it gets even more complicated when you're sending at high volume. When you're just sending P2P, me to you, you to me text messages, the likelihood that those are going to get delivered is really high. But when you start looking at a high volume use case, the likelihood that you're going to run into delivery issues becomes all the more likely.
On the next slide, when we're looking at this, what's happening this particular quarter and why is it unprecedented?
So getting back to some of the first things that we talked about, tons and tons of change is happening in the industry. And some of that starts with, some ruling and law changes. Some of this is, the CTIA coming out and releasing new guidelines. And some of it is new products that are hitting the market. So we talked about shared shortcodes beginning to sunset. We talked a little bit about that new 10DLC carrier route that's going to open up a new avenue for high volume messaging. But what we didn't talk about here is classification of SMS as an information service. And this basically gives carriers the ability to treat SMS like they would treat an email, for example. There's no hard and fast rules on what will and won't be blocked.
Okay, you keep saying the term A to P, but it's not as simple as a shortcode. Would you help us understand that?
Absolutely. So up until a couple of years ago, when you thought high volume messaging or A to P messaging, you thought that's synonymous with a shortcode or a 4 or 5 digit number. But we talked about some of this evolving industry roadmap a couple of slides ago. And we've got more avenues than ever opening up to send high volume messages. So things like a toll-free number, totally capable of sending PIN codes, alerts, notifications, promotions, and very soon your local number will be able to send and handle that exact same kind of traffic. So it's not as simple as is this message being sent on a shortcode, or is it being sent on a local number? The lines are certainly getting blurred there.
I see the agency, the FCC. What is their influence in messaging?
So the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. They are the governing body that sets rules and laws around the communications and telecommunications industry. And we talked a couple of slides ago that the FCC officially rolled text messaging as an information service rather than a telecom service. And so what that does is that gives carriers the ability to treat text messaging in any way they choose. So no hard and fast rules or laws around what they can and can't block or what they can and can't charge for. It's totally up to them to decide how they want to handle a text message.
Why does this give the carriers the ability to move independently, and what do you mean by independently?
If a carrier chose to, let's say, block text messages with links in them because they think links are synonymous with an unwanted message, they could. If they wanted to delay a message being sent for whatever reason, they could. And if they wanted to charge you more to send a specific type of message, again, they could. So it gives them a lot of flexibility around what they might want to do with text messaging.
You have two comments here, shared shortcodes and number pooling. What's the difference?
So really what this slide is getting at is talking about the changes in the A to P landscape. So shared shortcodes, again, like we mentioned, they're shutting down, slowly shutting down. And we saw a lot of folks in a couple years prior who were using lots and lots of local numbers in order to get around the restrictions, the volumetric restrictions on local numbers for sending high volume messages. And again, carriers are stepping up and really amping up those spam filters and saying, no, this is not an approved message, not an approved route for sending this type of message. So if you are a business and you're using, let's say, 100 different local phone numbers to send 100 messages all at the same time, carriers are really getting savvy to that. They will not allow that method for sending high volume messages on their networks anymore. You're going to need to find another alternative, something like local A2P or toll-free messaging or a dedicated shortcode even would work there, just depending on what your use case looks like, and the cost constraints you're looking to pay for.
How will this influence the market? Will messaging traffic explode even more?
Yeah, we absolutely think the growth pattern for messaging is just going to keep increasing. And here, this slide here talks about our new local A2P product, which is a really great alternative for those folks that were, maybe were using number pooling or were using shared short codes in the past and are looking for an alternative that has that local flavor they're looking for. So if you've got, let's say, a business, and maybe it's a food delivery business, and you've got locations all over the country, and you might want to send delivery alerts from your local branch instead of from one centralized location anyway. So this new product, this new technology really gives you that ability. It gives you the ability to do that at scale in a way that you never would have been able to do it before.
When we look at this slide, you say the word functionality here. There are 4 factors. Would you discuss those for us?
Yeah, so this is just some great benefits of the new local A2P API. So like we discussed, for some use cases, locality is absolutely crucial. You might get better response rate from sending from a local number that your customers know and trust and recognize. In some cases, you might want to use your existing business line. You're promoting one number. We're in Raleigh, North Carolina, so my office number starts with a 919. If I wanted to receive text from that number or send text from that number, that's going to be the expected number that I'd want to do that. I'd want to promote one number instead of having to use 2 different ones. Powerful performance metrics. It's crucial and critical to measure your message deliverability. I can't say that enough, how important it is to know how many of your messages are and aren't delivered and why. And then 2, using a local number or a toll-free number gives you the ability to elevate to a phone call, whereas a short code, you can't do that. So if you want to continue the conversation, or if it's so important, sometimes you just need to talk on the phone, using a local or toll-free number lets you do that, whereas a short code won't.
Would you take us through the evolution of the A2P?
A2P messaging isn't just synonymous with a short code anymore. And whereas shared short codes previously provided an affordable way to access A2P messaging, because they're so synonymous with spam, they're slowly being shut down and pushed out of the industry. So toll-free, that's something that's available today with bandwidth specifically, and it provides a great alternative for folks that are looking for an affordable alternative to shared short codes. And your local number very shortly will also be able to accommodate the exact same kind of traffic.
We have 3 business tips here for our audience. Would you go through those?
Number 1, so make sure if you're sending alerts, notifications, reminders, marketing, promotions, coupons, anything up that alley, those are more one-way than two-way. And if you'll remember, one-way messaging traffic, it's got a lot more rules of the road than on P2P. So make sure you're on a product that's set up to handle that type of traffic. And if you're confused at all, we'd love to talk to you at Bandwidth, and we actually offer a free assessment today to quickly tell you whether or not you're set up for success, or if you're going to run into problems in the next few months, knowing that there's so many changes up front. Number 2, if you're currently a short code user, make sure it's a dedicated short code. So dedicated short codes are just fine, not going anywhere, not at risk. But if you're sharing that short code with even 1 or 2 other businesses, you may be at risk, because if that other business is sending unwanted traffic, that shared short code could get shut down and you won't be able to get a new one. They're not going to be provisioning any new shared short codes. So again, you may be at risk. And then number 3, we've got so many changes that are coming in the messaging industry, so be sure to keep your eyes and ears open, because things are changing every day.
Where does Bandwidth fit into this messaging environment?
We are actually a carrier ourselves, and we make APIs. So it's a pretty unique combination. We make it really, really easy to access voice, messaging, 911, and phone numbers for businesses, with developers, product owners, anybody developing on the software side. But since we're a carrier ourselves, that gives us a unique seat at the table and a unique perspective for all of these changes that are happening. We really, really take it seriously about keeping our customers updated, make sure they're set up for success. And then, we go really, really deep on our API functionality. Because we're a carrier ourselves, we really, really know telecom, but we're able to speak the language of software as well. And this means we're trusted by some of the biggest brands in the world. We're really proud of the folks that choose to work with us. Folks like Google, Microsoft, Skype, just to name a few.
Now, you've mentioned the term local A2P, and just to finish off our discussion today, what do you mean by local A2P?
So like we mentioned, local A2P is our brand new API that we just launched in limited availability about a month ago. We're really excited to bring this to market. We expect it to be in a wider release by the end of the year, depending on how things shake out in the industry. So if you're a business and you're looking to take advantage of some of these messaging solutions that we talked about today, definitely visit us at bandwidth.com. And if you're worried at all about how you're set up to handle these messaging industry changes, request a free assessment. We'll be glad to take you through it and let you know exactly how ready and prepared you might be.
This is a lot to take in today, but I think the resources you have on the screen here are well worth accessing to take a look at, because a lot of people are saying, I haven't done this in the past. As mentioned, Caroline has talked about contacting the company, and this is the email address for Let's Talk and their 800 number. And I'd like to thank you, Caroline, for today's very enlightening and interesting EDUcast.
Thank you.